Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's your girl, the Brooke Ashley, and today we are here to discuss The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, Season 2, Reunion Part 3, and let me tell you something, y'all, we made it.
Thank you, God. Thank you. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you. Thank you, God.
I hate to say it, but this season of SLC was a big disappointment because SLC Season 2 really had the potential to be that girl, and she just fell flat. But with all that being said, let's just jump right on into this recap because I have quite a lot to say and we don't have a minute to spare. We start off this final part with all of the husbands out on the stage. Everybody's there in person except for Seth. Andy's going around asking how all the guys are doing. He's joking around with Coach Shah, asking if Jen is using a microphone in their bedroom. He says no, thank God. Then he's asking Seth if Meredith has visited him in Mississippi, because we all know that for Seth's job, he always has to live somewhere part-time, and right now he's in Mississippi. He says that Meredith has actually gone down to Mississippi to visit him, and it's been great. Now we see Andy joking around with Dewey. I was like, why is Dewey on my screen? Like, Dewey and Jenny, I'm gonna be real with y'all, I'm not gonna be talking about any of their scenes. But anyhow, Dewey and his goofy self is up there grinning from ear to ear about how the show has just been such a change, but he hasn't gotten any applications for sister wives. I was like, nobody is trying to be a second wife to you. And a quick side note, I was really shocked that Andy didn't bring up the TikTok video with Jenny and Dewey's alleged niece, claiming that they were using that sister wife stuff as a storyline to be on this show.
I have some tea about a Real Housewives cast member. I'm not going to say any names, but she's been recently getting attention as a new housewife, and I guess in the recent episode her husband gave her like a sister wife proposition, and his reasoning was that he wants more kids, which doesn't make sense because he didn't take care of his kids when they were little. Second, she's milking this whole crazy like I came from nothing storyline, which is not true at all. These people are so disgusting, they're willing to do anything for money. And I know this because she's my aunt and she used to stay with my family a lot, and my parents helped her so much, helped her in any way they can, looked after her kids, etc. And she threatened to sue them and throw them in jail so her husband and her could get some money.
I felt like that was a missed opportunity for Andy not to ask Dewey or Jenny about that, because that would have been one of the first things I asked. We now see Andy going on to ask Justin about Whitney clearing out their savings account for her beauty line. So he's like, well, that's actually not really accurate. It was just one of our savings accounts and it's completely liquid and we were going to use that to buy a cabin, but she cleared it all out for her business and her business is doing really well and I'm proud of her. Then he goes on to say that Whitney is his best investment and he doesn't mind. I said, now Justin, that's awfully sweet of you to say that about your wife, but you don't have to lie, because in that episode, you and Whitney were worried about finances. You were saying, you know, like, I got other kids to take care of. Our kids have college to think about. You know, you're clearing out the accounts. He seemed worried and you were crying. So all of this, well, you know, that was just one of our savings accounts and that was going to be used for a cabin and it wasn't all the money. I'm like, I don't buy it. And I never looked at Whitney or Justin like they just had so much money. So I was like, okay, if that's a story that you guys want to tell now, then so be it. But Whitney interjects and says that her skincare line is doing really well now and sales are up 540%. And then, of course, Heather has to interject because Lord knows she can't go a minute without getting some sort of screen time. And she's like, yeah, I can confirm that because I carry Whitney's products and every time it restocks, they sell out immediately. And I said, I'm sure the 30 products that you restock every other week will sell out. But anyhow, Whitney puts anybody's doubts about their finances to rest by adding that she's Justin's retirement plan and she's putting the money back into the account. And I said, good for you, Whitney, because I know that you guys need every dime since Justin has recently lost his job. And on top of that, he's facing charges for allegedly running a multi-level marketing pyramid scheme. So I'm sure you guys do need every dime back in the pot. So now Andy changes gears and he goes on to ask Seth, how did he feel when he saw Lisa's rant? So Seth goes on to say, nobody went through more pain than my wife. With her father passing away and cameras in her face while she was trying to grieve, my wife really went through it. You could tell that since John and Seth are really good friends, Seth was trying not to go hard on Lisa because he didn't really answer the question. And Andy was like, okay, that's all well and good, but how did you feel hearing Lisa say that your wife has slept with half of New York City? So now Seth makes a joke and he's like, well, did she tell you that I slept with the other half? Everybody starts laughing. And while I like Seth and his sense of humor, I would have preferred for Seth to have gotten petty because Lisa was saying some real messed up stuff. She was pretty much saying that he didn't have a job. He's always bouncing around from job to job, always moving, insinuating like they have some money problems and that's why they don't own their house. I was like, Seth is a class act because I know some men who would have really gone off. So now Andy turns his attention to John, Lisa's husband, and he's like, John, what did you think hearing your wife saying those really nasty things about Meredith and Seth? So John's like, it was really disheartening to hear. I couldn't believe it myself, but I know that my wife just says stuff when she's angry, but she really does hold Meredith and Seth in high regard, and I hope that they can patch things up. So while John is speaking, Lisa turns to Meredith and she mouths out the words, I'm sorry, and Meredith says, I know. Lisa, it's too late for that. We are past I'm sorry. Girl, you said what you said. You meant what you said. I mean, you went on a full-blown tirade about me, my kids, and my husband. There's no coming back from that. I wish you well. Well, actually, I don't wish you well because I'm petty. I've told you guys several times I hold grudges. So the best that I could say is, girl, just be blessed. Like, that's all I got for you. Now Andy pivots the conversation and he starts questioning Dewey about the whole sister-wife, him wanting more kids conversation. And I told you guys earlier that I have nothing for Dewey or Jenny. So we are going to move right on along. I'm not going to spend valuable time discussing a fake storyline of two races. That's not going to happen. Now it's time to discuss one of the biggest moments that happened this season, and that was Jen's arrest. So Andy says, Coach Shah, can you walk us through the day that you found out that Jen was being arrested? So he says that he was at the hospital because he was having some health issues. His assistant was with him, and his assistant had his phone. So he says that within 25 minutes, he receives a call from Homeland Security, and he goes home, and when he got home, he saw guns pointed at his son. So now Andy goes on to ask Sharrieff if he was really dealing with internal bleeding like Jen told the other women. So Coach Shah says, look, Andy, all I can say is I've been dealing with rectal bleeding. The doctors had some concerns, so I guess you could say it was gastrointestinal bleeding. Now, I remember when that episode aired, I immediately assumed that Jen was lying about the whole internal bleeding. I was like, she's saying anything to get off that bus. Now Andy goes on to ask Sharrieff, how did it feel watching the other ladies talk about Jen while they were in Vail? So he says that he watched it because Jen couldn't watch it. It was too painful to her, and how he was also hurt watching what they were saying too. So while Sharrieff is discussing how hurt his wife was, Jen already has the tissues out and she's sobbing. Now I said, let's not do this because I think that anybody would have some questions if their friend is being indicted on multiple charges of wire fraud. I know I'd have some questions. Some stuff, you gotta chalk it up to human nature. I don't see anybody just sitting there silently and their friend has been arrested, the FBI, Homeland Security, and everybody else under the sun has come for your friend, I'm going to have some questions. I'm also going to have some doubts about my friend's innocence as well, especially seeing that your friend has now been charged and on top of that is facing 50 years in prison. I'm going to have some questions. And if the shoe were on the other foot, Jen and her big mouth would be saying a whole bunch of stuff too. So please spare me this. I just couldn't believe what they were saying. It just really hurt me to my core. It's like, girl, you allegedly scammed and defrauded the elderly. So please. And honestly, nobody really talked about your case that much because everybody was too busy worried about Meredith and Mary's friendship. So you got off really easy. So now Andy goes on to ask Jen and Coach Shah if there's ever been infidelity in their marriage. Now, in my opinion, I felt like that no that they both gave was weak and not too convincing. It gave very much, there has been, but we don't want to discuss it, and we're going to put on a united front. But the way Jen was crying when Andy asked that, Sharrieff looked a bit nervous. I wasn't convinced that there hasn't been infidelity, especially with Coach Shah's track record not being home. He's walked out before, didn't come back home 4 days later. Jen revealed that in an episode last season. And the way Coach Shah was pushing for a divorce at one point, I definitely think that there was some infidelity on his part. Again, my opinion, but I wasn't too convinced by them both saying no. I said, okay, I guess that's the story and you guys are going to stick to it. Okay. So now Andy starts reading some tweets from viewers asking why Coach Shah is not receiving the same energy that Erica Jane got and if he ever had any questions about where the money was coming from. So Coach Shah pauses before he answers and then he says, no, I never questioned it because my wife has been working for 20 plus years. Like, she's always been a worker, always had a good work ethic. So no, I didn't question anything. Then he goes on to add that the designer pieces that we see his wife in, it's been an accumulation from over the years. Now, Coach Shah, I commend you for the media-trained answers and sticking up for your wife, but let's not sit here and play in our faces. We are not stupid. The pieces in Jen's closet easily add up to a few $1 million. She is not able to afford that on a salary making low 6 figures. Okay? Also, we've seen pictures of the house that you guys were living in prior to getting on the show. It was worth, they said, $200 and something thousand. A cute house, but nothing that's going to blow anybody out the water. So I think that you definitely did have some questions when you saw that you guys were going to move from that to a $9 million, 10,000 square foot chalet in Park City. There weren't any questions then. I'm not believing that. Then Andy goes on to ask Sharrieff if he was ever worried that he would be implicated. He says no, not at all, because he's been working for his whole entire life, so he was never worried about being caught up in all these charges with his wife. Then Sharrieff continues by saying that he's never doubted his wife for a minute and how whether the outcome is good or bad, they're going to get through this as a family and he's going to have her side. And I said, well, obviously he's going to say that. Do you really think that somebody's spouse is going to get on national TV and say, yeah, I think they're guilty, they're going to jail, and when they go to jail, I'm going to be out the door? Like, of course he's going to say, I'm going to be a loving husband, I'm going to stick beside her. I mean, that's what a good spouse does. I mean, in the back of his mind, he might be thinking the opposite, but that is nice that he's putting on a united front for the cameras. Now Andy really starts asking the good questions, and he goes on to ask Sharrieff if he knew what his wife did because the viewers and her castmates couldn't understand what she did. I still don't know what Jen did either. So Sharrieff starts laughing and he says, I can't say too much because it goes with her case, but I will say that I did understand what she did. Now I said, every single time Jen is trying to explain what she does, it makes no sense. And I've always had a bit of a side eye for folks who can't explain what they do for a living, but they appear to be making all this money, because it generally reeks of a scam. If you can't easily say what your profession is and explain it in a few sentences, I'm going to always give a side eye, because it's like, it shouldn't be that difficult. You should be able to say, I'm an investment banker, I'm a teacher, I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor, I'm a nurse, I'm in tech, I'm in fashion, I'm a designer, I'm a makeup artist, I'm a content creator, I'm an influencer. Like, it shouldn't be that difficult. You know what I'm saying? So Jen is getting upset listening to Andy question her husband, and now she interjects and says, you know, it was really hurtful listening to what Whitney was saying about me throughout the season, talking about what I do. Then she turns to Whitney and says, you never try to understand what I do for a living either. So now Andy interjects and he's like, but Jen, you're facing charges. So now she gets angry and says, yeah, Andy, but I'm innocent until proven guilty. So Whitney's trying to apologize, and then Jen claps back and says, you're talking about me when your husband Justin is going through something similar. He has a whole FTC against him. And I was screaming at how tight Whitney and Justin's faces got, because they were hoping that nobody was going to mention the problems that they're going through. So now Andy starts questioning Justin about this whole charge against him and his business allegedly being a multi-level marketing pyramid scheme. And he's like, well, it's been a lawsuit going on for like a few years now. I'm not involved in anything, but you know how these things go. I said, oh, Whitney, it's just so funny because you want to get in everybody else's business, but when Andy digs into your business, now you want to be upset. It was so funny watching her squirm while her husband was answering those questions. Now, Jen interjects yet again, and she is livid. She's like, it's just so funny to me how y'all have to question what the brown girl with the black husband do for a living and how they get their money. Like, my husband has 3 degrees. He used to be an NFL agent, a lawyer, and now he's a D1 coach. And I'm like, okay, sis, that's cool and all, but let's not use all that to deflect from the real issue. The real issue was Coach Shah's salary doesn't match up to the lifestyle that you live. The math ain't mathin'. So now Andy goes on to ask John about how he felt about his wife not reaching out to Jen when the news broke about her arrest and all the charges. So John says, look, I've been in the room when my wife and Jen have gotten into it, and things get very heated, but they always make up and get close again. Then he adds that he knew about the photo shoot drama, and he knew that his wife needed time to cool off and let it blow over. So now Andy turns to Coach Shah, and he goes on to ask, how did Coach Shah feel seeing that Lisa did not reach out to his wife? So he goes on to say that he was shocked and disappointed because he thought that Lisa would be the first person to call. Then he goes on to add that Heather was actually the first person to reach out and how his wife needed a friend. Now, I understand that that's his wife, but I have an issue with Sharrieff trying to act like his wife is just so sweet. Jen has been very nasty to people from what we've seen last season and this season. She has an awful temper. He knows it firsthand. So for him to act like, well, I had no idea, I couldn't believe that everybody turned their backs on my wife. Well, your wife hasn't been a good friend to other people. And Heather is such a desperate kiss ass. Are you really that surprised that Heather was there for your wife? Heather lets anybody treat her like garbage and she'll still be there. And y'all know how I feel about Lisa, but let's just call a spade a spade. Lisa is not a friend to anybody, so how could anybody be shocked that Lisa wasn't there for them? Lisa and Jen are 2 sides of the same coin, both very self-centered, can't take accountability for anything, so you can't be surprised that Lisa would be like, shout out to everybody, I have fun, in somebody's time of need. Like I've said in previous recaps, Lisa is a friend in the good times only. In the bad times, you can bet your last dollar that she's going to be gone. So Andy goes on to ask his final question, and he wants to know, how does Coach Shah stay so optimistic knowing that his wife is facing 50 years in jail? He says, look, we have no choice but to keep our heads up. Then he adds that Jen really gets out the bed because of their youngest son. He'll come into the room and say, Mommy, I love you. Like, come out the bed and let's do something. So Jen is crying, and then Andy thanks all the husbands for coming out, and he dismisses them. And now Andy starts asking Heather about the moment that she just shared between her, Whitney, and Lisa. So I'm like, wait, what just happened? Baby, they roll the tape back, and we see that 9 minutes earlier, Lisa, Whitney, and Heather all had a come to Jesus moment, and they're cool again. Lisa is sitting with the both of them on their side of the couch, and they're hugging each other. Heather and Whitney are both kissing up to Lisa, and we see Whitney begging Lisa for a hug. When I tell you that I was this close to just turning the TV off and saying, you know what, I'm done. I said, Heather and Whitney, y'all are the epitome of pathetic. Y'all have been on Lisa's case this entire time. Now, all of a sudden, you guys are kissing her ass, apologizing, telling her how much you love her, and wanting a hug? And to see Whitney begging Lisa for a hug was one of the most embarrassing things that I have ever witnessed. She must have asked Lisa for a hug about 5 times in a 2-minute span. Like, are you serious right now? I don't care what anybody says. Heather and Whitney have a fixation on Lisa. For some reason, they have deemed Lisa as the coolest person that they have ever met, and because of that, they want to be in her good graces by any means necessary. I have never witnessed anything like this. And I want you two idiots to get something clear. The only reason why Lisa is cozying up to you guys is because Lisa knows that going into season 3, she no longer has her good friends by her side. She's on the outs with Jen and Meredith. She only has you two to befriend and film with. So if you really think that this little alliance is going to last between the 3 of you guys, think again. Because should she make up with Meredith or Jen, it's going to be the same dynamic as usual. Y'all two will be left in the dust, crying and complaining about how Lisa does not want to be your friend yet again. I have never seen a franchise where grown-ass women are this pressed about somebody being their friend. And I was rolling my eyes so hard at the BS coming out of Heather's mouth. She was like, Andy, you know what? I just realized that I want to be in the ugly with Lisa. Like, I really love Lisa so much. And, like, I don't want to fight with her. I was like, you really are just pathetic. Like, I don't know how much more I can say it, but, like, you really are desperate. Like, girl, what are you saying? What does that even mean? I want to be in the ugly with you. Like, what are you saying? And I'm so sorry that I'm yelling, y'all, but I was just so annoyed. Like, what does that mean? And then Heather saying that the reason why she's on this couch is because of Lisa. I was like, okay. So now Lisa is the one who got you this gig. Now, I thought that all the drama last season was Lisa saying that she didn't know you. So if Lisa didn't know you, then how did she recommend you to be on this show? I said, Heather, I want you to stop playing in my face like I'm an idiot. Just say that you want this woman's friendship by any means necessary, so you're going to kiss up to her now. I'm like, this is just so sad to watch. Like, I have secondhand embarrassment. So now Meredith interjects, and she's like, excuse me, Heather. Like, I'm also the reason why you're on this show, too. So now Heather's like, oh my gosh, Meredith, you're right. Like, you're right, and thank you so much. I was like, that's a damn shame. Now, all of a sudden, Lisa gets all the credit when Meredith is a big part of why you're on the show. So now they start joking about Meredith holding grudges. And they're like, yeah, you know, it took a long time for Meredith to forgive Jen. So Lord knows how long it's going to take her to forgive Lisa for that rant. Now, I was like, I don't think that Meredith holds grudges. I think that she's a normal person who has boundaries. There's nothing wrong with cutting somebody off. You're not a bad person if you no longer want to continue a friendship. I don't understand why they're low-key forcing Meredith to just get over what happened with her and Lisa. Let me tell you something right now. I would be telling all these people, y'all can kiss my ass. We're not going to be friends again, so stop pushing it. Heather, just because your self-esteem is low and you accept shitty treatment from people, stop projecting all of that onto Meredith. Now, Andy turns his attention back to Jen, and he wants to discuss the day of the arrest at Beauty Lab. So he says, so you were arrested, taken to the courthouse, and questioned. Do you remember anything about the indictment or the charges? Did you ask why you were facing 50 years? So now Jen's playing dumb, and she's like, you know what, honestly, I don't remember anything. Like, I don't even know that I'm facing 50 years. So Andy's looking at her like, girl, what? You don't even know the charges against you? You don't know that you're facing 50 years in prison? Like, I think that anybody would remember that. And again, I'm not understanding this cavalier attitude that Jen has. She seems very delusional. I don't know if this is a way to cope with what's going on, but you need to get it together and get it together real fast. Now Andy brings up the fact that Jen allowed Bravo to show the ring footage of her boys and her nephew being arrested. She says that she wanted to show America that even though it's 2022, this is how Black people are treated when dealing with the police. So she starts crying, and then she adds, now what if my son or my nephew had made a wrong move? Now, I was surprised finding out that she had submitted that footage to Bravo. I feel like if I were in that position, although it's a teachable moment for America, I don't know if I would have wanted to show that. Your son has already been through enough. Your nephew has been through enough. I just don't know if I would have wanted to show the world that that had happened. You know, I remember feeling very upset seeing that. So here's where the double talk, confusion, and lies and half-truths begin. Andy brings up Jen's former right-hand man, Stuart. He wants to know if Jen has spoken to Stuart, and she says no. So now Andy starts asking, how close was Stuart to you? So she says he was around me for 10 years, but he wasn't involved in my businesses, and although he was my assistant, he wasn't around me every day. Now, Jen, we all remember what you were saying about Stuart all last season. And when Bravo played that footage back, you said out your own mouth that he was your assistant, right-hand person. He was always around. Whatever you needed, he was there to do. I remember you bragging in last season about how you could call Stuart up in the middle of the night and he would do it. So now to hear, well, he wasn't around me every day, he wasn't involved in my businesses, it's like, girl, stop. You were better off saying nothing. I would have said, Andy, I have to plead the fifth because I'm not at liberty to discuss this. That's what I would have said. And it was so comical when you said, yeah, you know, Stuart wasn't around me all the time. That's why I had 10 other assistants around me. I said, again, we all know that you weren't paying these 10 assistants. And the word on the street was half of those assistants were family and friends and people who only took the gig to be on TV. So Andy keeps pressing Jen, and he says, but Jen, you did say that he was your business partner. So she says, no, he wasn't my business partner. I was just expanding businesses, and he was around. Like, he would help me, but we weren't partners. Then Andy goes on to ask the $64 million question, and that is, how does Jen feel seeing that Stuart has changed his plea deal to guilty? So she says, I can't answer that because it deals with the case. Then Andy goes on to ask the other women if they've spoken to Stuart, and Lisa says that she reached out to him but didn't hear anything, and then Heather says that she reached out too but didn't hear anything from him either. So Jen is upset, and she says under her breath, I'm sure you did reach out to him. And she's talking to Lisa because she's mad at Lisa. Again, Jen, don't be mad at Lisa. Lisa has shown you who she is as a friend, and you can't be too surprised or too upset. Now Andy really stirs the pot when he brings up how all the ladies were talking about how Jen gets her money. So Jen's upset and she's like, I knew that people were full of shit a year ago. And also, it's just so funny how everybody wants to question the brown girl and how she makes money. And I said again, here's what we're not going to do, because this isn't about race. This is about people have questions because the math ain't mathin'. You're not clear about what you do for a living. Your husband makes a good salary, but not good enough where you guys can afford 4 homes, okay? And private jets every weekend, and a closet that would rival Saks or Neiman Marcus. People are going to have some questions. Also, your former assistant spilled that Porsche that you were driving all last season was borrowed. So again, Miss Jen, I don't understand why you're still trying to keep up this facade like you have it like that. And also, of course these ladies would have questions, because if they knew you back then they saw the house that you were living in before. So I'm sure they were shocked, like, wait, what happened? She was living in this house and now we're on TV and now she's living in this house? Like, wait, what? Anybody would be confused. And I loved when Andy called you out and said, well, Jen, on your audition tape, you were talking about how you spend upwards of $50,000 a month. And when she was quiet and shrugged her shoulders, I was like, don't shrug your shoulders now, sis. Stand in it. Because you know that you were spending money that y'all really didn't have. But now it's Cass got your tongue when Andy calls you out about what you were saying in that audition tape. So of course Jen is in her feelings. And now Andy goes on to ask her if she feels like Whitney is a flip-flopper. And she says, well, yeah, looking back on this season, I definitely think that she is. Then Jen brings up Whitney's Watch What Happens Live appearances where she was making jokes about Jen having a sugar daddy. And now Heather steps in and she's like, Jen, are you serious? Of all the things to be mad about, you're mad about her saying that? Like, she was just joking. So now Jen is yelling because they all act like she should be happy that they're even friends with her. And so Heather's like, well, honestly, Jen, that's how you've treated me in the past. Like, you're doing me a favor. So now Jen starts deflecting and she's like, can you stop bringing that up? Like, okay, I already apologized to you. Like, you constantly bring it up how I treated you like shit. I was like, Jen, do you hear yourself? Like, I really wish that somebody would curse Jen out because I really hate her attitude. You should be happy that Heather is still even your friend. Because to be very honest with you, many people would go Meredith's route. I know that I would have cursed you out last season and never spoken to you again. It's just so funny that Jen wants to scream and yell at people, treat them like garbage, but then she's mad when they bring it up. That's not how this works, sis. And Heather, you're a fool for sticking by her side, because nobody who's making jokes about my body and appearance would ever talk to me again. Now, Andy turns to Lisa and he goes on to ask her, why was she trying to distance herself from Jen? So Jen starts screaming, not letting Lisa speak, and Lisa's like, Jen, don't do this. Let me speak. Let me answer the question. This is my question to answer. Let me answer it, please. He's not talking to you. He's talking to me. Let me answer the question. So, of course, Jen is still screaming like a nut. And Andy goes on to ask Lisa, why did she feel the need to call all 6 of her lawyers? So Lisa says, look, I called all 6 of my lawyers on speed dial because I wanted some answers to some questions that I had, okay? I wanted to know what was on the docket. So Jen is upset hearing this. She calls Lisa a bitch and she's like, what are you talking about, the docket? And Lisa's like, you know what I'm saying, the docket. I wanted to know what was on the docket. So now Lisa and Jen are going back and forth. Andy gets him to stop. And now he starts discussing the whole conversation that they had in Vail. So he says, Meredith, you said that Jen was guilty. So Meredith says, no, I did not say that. Okay, I said innocent until proven guilty. So now Jen interrupts and she's like, well, Meredith, it looked like you were saying that I was guilty. I was like, baby, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what these ladies think. It matters what the judge says. So worry about the judge and the jury. Don't worry about what they're saying and thinking. And I think that most people would think that you're guilty. seeing that you're facing 50 years. Now Andy wants to know if Jen is red flagged at Louis Vuitton, and Jen says that she isn't. So now she goes on to ask Meredith, where did Meredith hear that from? And Meredith says, look, somebody at Louis Vuitton told me that you are red flagged there, okay? So I'm just saying what I heard. So now Andy wants to know, why did Meredith hire a private investigator? So Meredith says, look, it wasn't a PI, it was a cyber specialist. And I called him up because my sons were getting threatening messages. I was getting threatening messages. And then she mentions that even Heather called her up because Heather was getting messages as well. So Meredith goes on to say that the cyber specialist concluded that it was most likely Jen, and Jen is upset hearing this, and she's like, well, why did he assume that it was me? So Meredith says, although it wasn't a conclusive answer that it was you, he said that it was most likely you because the fact that this person had me and Heather's contacts. And the only people who have our numbers would be Andy, everybody here in this room, and people on production. So now Jen starts hollering for her husband, and she says, somebody get my husband out here, please, and give me my phone, because my sons were getting messages too. They were being told that they were going to be skinned alive, and how do I know it's not one of you guys? So everybody on that stage is like, now girl, we might not like you, but you know good and damn well that nobody would ever say that to you and your boys. Even Heather spoke up and was like, now Jen, none of us on this stage would ever say that to your sons, so don't even start. So now Heather grabs Jen's hand and she says that she loves Jen Shah and she will be in the court supporting Jen day in and day out. So now Andy goes on to ask Meredith if Meredith thinks that Jen is innocent or guilty. Meredith says, look, I don't know, that's for the judge and the jury to decide. And you could see that Jen was so hurt that Meredith would not say, oh, I think she's innocent. Meredith really wanted to say, girl, I think you're guilty. But she was trying to be diplomatic. So now Jen starts getting emotional and she says that she's innocent and she's going to fight for the people who can't fight and don't have a voice. So now Andy wants to close this show out and he asks them all to say a few final words. So Jen thanks everybody who has been by her side in this whole ordeal, and she also says that we all need to be less quick to judge, including herself. Heather says that the biggest takeaway that she's learned is that everybody is human and nobody is above redemption. Jenny, who I forgot about, says that she's going to learn to speak her mind more. And I said, well, thank God it will not be on this platform since you have been fired. Bye, loser. Whitney says that she wants to believe in herself more. Meredith goes on to say that going forward, she's not going to let things fester. She's not going to bottle things up. She's going to just let it out in the open when things come. And then Lisa closes out by saying she's not used to being vulnerable because she wasn't raised that way, but she wants to get better. And how, because of that, people don't see her heart or her true character. I said, girl, we see it and we don't like it. You're very self-absorbed, very self-centered. You don't take accountability for anything. You're two-faced and you're shallow. But you crying and making excuses for why you're a pretty terrible person, I was like, please save it. But we close out the reunion with them eating some churros and we are done. I have to say, there were many times where I felt like stopping. I was just so over SLC, especially when they were in Zion. The way they were getting on Meredith and Mary, I wasn't here for it. This was just too long of a season. Not a whole lot went on for it to have been 21 episodes. I think that Mary did the right thing by skipping out. Her presence was greatly missed. I will definitely miss seeing Mary on my TV. And the fact that she will not be coming back, I think that this is my last and final SLC recap because I don't see myself going forward. But guys, we did it. We powered through it by the grace of God. Thank you all all for watching. And please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you all later. Bye.